So we decided to do a little something special for Halloween. And Martin selected us something, and I admittedly did not really look at it before it was sent to us in our DM. I just knew that it was an action thing and that it was going to be a horror thing. Um, Nothing could have prepared me for Nightmare on Elm Street, the soap opera. And I want to be up front here. This is where you're going to regret everything. I have never seen a Nightmare on Elm Street film in full. This was my first piece of Freddy Krueger official fiction.
Oh no.
I invented. What have you done?
Well, what an introduction. At least at least you started with the origin story.
Start at the beginning.
So yeah, we selected a live action show, an unprecedented choice for the animates. But we have discussed doing the occasional live action series now and then. So for Halloween, we selected Freddy's Nightmares, a TV series in which Freddy Krueger took on a Crypt Keeper-esque role and did like spooky stories once a week. I assume it was once a week. I don't know what Robert Englund's schedule was like. But he's in some of them. I think he's in like 2 or 3. And the first episode, which we watched, called No More Mr. Nice Guy, is a flashback to the origin of Freddy Krueger and how the residents of, what's the town called?
I think it's Springwood.
Springwood. Yes, of course, he's the Springwood slasher. Thank God we asked you on, Rachel.
Because I wouldn't have remembered.
I was about to say Elm Street, and I was like, no, that's the road. That's not the whole town.
It's on Elm Street, on the Elm Block in the neighborhood of Elmhurst in Elmville.
In the state of Elmton.
Yes. Exactly
I think of how Arthur took place in a town called Elwood, and I'm like, you're cutting it kind of close, buddy. Crossover I want.
No!
They are
Design Freddy Krueger as an uncanny bunny like Lance Armstrong was.
God, no.
The true horror. This show is pretty low budget.
I was gonna say, I thought I was watching a Tim and Eric sketch at the beginning with the news anchor.
Yeah, I could have done a more expensive looking series than this with the camera on my phone. So, what did we all think of Freddy's Nightmares Season 1, Episode 1, No More Mr. Nice Guy?
Well,
you go.
Silence speaks volumes.
That's me trying to figure out which one of us talks first. Since I, don't really have familiarity with Elm Street as a franchise, I kind of just looked at this, from my perspective as a horror lover and an obscure horror lover at that. And that's why I feel this read more like a soap opera. Like, it didn't really build so much suspense to the scary bits. It was kind of like the suburban town's reaction to having a serial killer and how this causes drama in one's family when there's a serial killer in town. And like, there was a lot here that I felt was going for an utterly different genre than horror, did not actually scare me. Once we actually got into the segment where Freddy was haunting the cop, it started to feel a little more punchy. At the same time, it was incredibly corny. I want to tell you that there's the scene where the cop, who fully believes that he murdered Freddy and that Freddy is dead, he receives a mysterious letter. It says, "I'm burning in hell with Bashir," and then it explodes into fire in his hands, and I just fell over laughing.
It reminded me of the Rachel, you probably won't get this reference, so I apologize in advance. But there's an episode of The Simpsons where Sideshow Bob is mailing Bart threatening letters, and Homer accidentally opens one of them, and he's like, "Oh my God, someone's trying to kill me!" Oh wait, it's for Bart. And I just imagine that cop's daughter, like his wife, just opens the letter and is like, "Oh my God, someone's sending me threatening letters." Oh, I'm sorry, dear, it's for you.
Oh my God! Someone's trying to kill me! Oh wait, it's for Bart.
In preparation for this, Rachel and I were talking on Discord last night, and Rachel raised kind of an thought-provoking query as to why Freddy seems to be like the mascot of slashers. And I didn't really think about it before, but it's because he's like one of the only ones who talks, because they couldn't exactly be like Jason's Nightmares, where he hosts in between skits. And I kind of got to picturing like, and next on Fox, Leatherface's Nightmares. And it's just the camera's on him, and he's like, ah! And then the skit starts.
Just chainsaws the whole like camera crew. That's the end.
Thank you, Leatherface. And now for the skit. It's like a romance story. It's not even scary.
Yeah.
You know what would be cool? I just thought of this on the fly. What if there was like a horror anthology show where Ghostface is the host and he's showing you his horror movie collection?
Oh,
See, I
that
was
would
thinking
work.
about Ghostface, and I'm like, he's the other one who's allowed to have a personality, but I think what stops him from being more than a physical symbol is that he or she changes identities even once per film. There's usually 2 ghost faces per film. And so, like, if Ghostface were to do an anthology series, like, I feel to best capture the spirit, you would have to, like, rotate actors. Like, it's always the same costume, but, it takes the audience a little bit to realize that the voice is different in every
Yeah,
intro.
that'd be fun. I think we have an idea here.
That would
But
work.
what network is doing this? We gotta pitch it.
I mean, literally the only other horror icon you could do it with is Pinhead, because he's the only other one who speaks. But I feel like
Yeah.
he's far too eloquent and too like he's too much of a class act to do like a trashy like horror anthology.
Oh,
He'd
and
be,
Well, like,
we were talking about Pinhead last night too, and based on the fact that Clive Barker refuses to actually canonically make his name Pinhead, how do you even go about this?
yeah, well,
I kind
nobody
of picture
ever
it.
calls him Pinhead in the movies. There's only one person who says Pinhead in the entire series, and they do it as like a throwaway gag insult, which he does not dignify with a response.
And then the fandom's just like, that's his name now.
I kind of picture it like I've been watching a lot of Veggie Tales lately, just feeling nostalgic, and how there's Larry the Cucumber is the usual host, and he does the silly songs, and it's very wacky. But every now and then, Archibald the Asparagus is this very erudite, classy character. He like gets to guest host, and it's in a very classy manner. So I picture it like that's like what Pinhead does. Is like every 10 episodes, he's like, I'm bringing some class to this joint. Just sits down with a glass of wine, and he's like, we're actually going to read from the texts of Gilbert and Sullivan. None of that trashy horror slasher nonsense Freddy and Ghostface bring to the table.
I think that's absolutely, yeah. He would just do like a book club. He would not pull out like some low budget horror animated series or something.
A book club with the other horror icons, so he can like be like, no, what did you think of the ending of Pride and Prejudice, Pumpkinhead? Yes, I agree. The ending was quite. It did subvert my expectations a bit.
I do think Freddy is he's a great sort of celebrity figure, because at some point during the Nightmare on Elm Street films, I think around the time of the 4th one, he just became like he was a comedic. He was still a horror character, but he was very much comedic, and the jokes were based upon him killing people in ridiculous ways.
Oh yeah.
That was the charm of those films, and I think the charm of Freddy as a character. But he'd like the Are You Ready for Freddy rap video that he did in the 90s. He was just put into all these ridiculous projects.
My advice to you is to stay ready, cause you know who's back? Freddy. You see, my name is Freddy, and I'm here to say I'll wrap you up and take you away. Feel like you're tired and ready for bed. Don't fall asleep or you'll wake up dead.
We open on a court case involving Freddy, and the funniest detail of this for me is that he chose to wear his green and red striped sweater to the court case. Because the state-appointed lawyer was like, now you probably want to dress professionally for this. And he's just like, good old green and red stripes. Never fails, bitch.
And he's got his hat in his hands as well while he's been handcuffed.
This is just where like the soap opera atmosphere starts to hit, because he barely says anything during this segment. Like, it's mostly people discussing his horrible deeds, and then the people in the audience are like, no, the humanity. And then, you know, the what sets the whole conflict of this episode off is that the evidence used to convict him was taken during an illegal search, so he has to be released, even though he obviously did the killings. I'm not sure that's how the law works, but whatever. And basically, when he walks out the door, like, everyone starts making this melodramatic, I can't even describe.
Very melodramatic.
It's like they've been overtaken by a biblical plague.
I love the girl who's like, Daddy, will Freddy be back? And I just said to myself, yes, he will, in another 7 movies.
Excuse me?
I love the scene outside where things immediately escalate between the townspeople, unless the one guy is like, it's time we took the law into our own hands. And then this other guy just immediately goes, are you suggesting we all become a lynch mob? And I was like, whoa, man, let's just take a step back.
I was going to say steel cable. Jesus.
Yeah, like, dear God, Jerry, I was just suggesting a citizen's arrest. They resort to murder pretty quick.
I have to, my favorite fucking line in the whole thing, like the thing that made the whole worth it for me, is when they finally corner him to murder him, and Officer Tim shows up and he's like, you know, I gotta save my daughters. And, you know, he's having the moral dilemma though about if he should do this because it's going to be another violation. So he's like, should I uphold the law and protect my job integrity, or should I get rid of the guy who has traumatized my children? And so then he shows up to head off the vigilante group. And they have their whole standoff. And they're like, what should we do? And it ends with Tim just stonily goes, the law is the law. But tonight, the law is on vacation! And he canister of gasoline. That made the entire thing for me.
I think the best part is when he's like all scared of the repercussions. I think his wife or someone says like, "You're a cop. They don't arrest cops." It's literally like an Always Sunny cut of him in jail.
Yeah.
Tim gets arrested.
When that came out, I couldn't help but feel like there was some bizarre, weird, half social commentary going on here that I don't think I need to explain why, but it's almost like they were trying to grasp at something and then no, nothing was grasped.
But tonight, the law is on vacation.
The other thing that got me about Freddy burning to death, though, is that he stands there and asks for it. And here's where I don't know my my Elm Street lore, did he know he was some kind of supernatural being that would be able to continue after death?
Well, so some of the other Elm Street films touch on Freddy's burning to death origin. And in Freddy, what's the series called? A Nightmare on Elm Street. In Nightmare on Elm Street, I want to say 6. There's like a flashback, and this was the one they did in 3D. Which does not help, but there is a flashback sequence to when he gets burned alive, and suddenly, as he is burning, like mid burn, these little demon creatures show up in 3D, and they're like, "Hey, Freddy, waking up!" I'm moving my hand like up and down like a puppet at the moment, and I'm doing like a little mouth. They're like, "Hey, Freddy, we can help you. You can become all powerful if you help us." My hand movements are amazing. You're missing out on this being audio only. And then they give him his dream nightmare powers.
So if you could put that in conjunction with this,
Yeah.
like basically in that execution scene, and when he stood there for a solid 2 minutes and told them to pour as much gas on him as they wanted, he was just taking an ultra gamble there.
It seems like it, yeah, because I don't think those demons had contacted him previously.
There is a 1% chance I will come back as a vengeful ghost.
I like those odds. Did anyone else find it strange? I don't know if this is just me, but whenever you see Freddy, except for right at the end, he's always shot from behind. He's always in shadow. He's always got the hat on, and you never see Robert Englund's face. Does anyone
what
else
did they
think?
have against his face? Like, okay, at first I had a running theory. Because I was like, oh, this is a spin-off thing. I don't even know if this is canon. This must be a different guy than Robert Englund. I have prosopagnosia, face blindness. I couldn't tell. But anyway, then the credits, he's the first name that comes up. And I'm like, so you weren't trying to hide that this was a different actor. This is absolutely the same guy. You just couldn't show his face because it would ruin the mystique, I guess, if he had a mortal human's face.
Well, I thought the same
it's
thing as
'cause-
you, and that it was just they could afford Robert Englund, but only for the studio segments where he's doing the narration. Like if it was a full episode, they just got some random dude because they didn't need to pay Robert Englund, and this is like done on a very small budget. So they were like, we've only got enough money for 5 minutes of Robert Englund. How much does he charge per episode? It's not enough. We need to replace him. I'll do it myself. And it was just
they're trying to hide the fact that before Freddy was burned, he was like super handsome, like ridiculously, like unfairly handsome. Like he was like the handsome Squidward meme. That's what he looked like.
Local male model, Fred Krueger.
That's why it's so hard to admit you want to burn him alive, because like any old guy you'd kill. It's like, oh, but he's the kind of good looking though. That guy killed all those people, really?
And I'm being serious here. I love when that plays into the characterization of a villain. Like if they're really beautiful and charming and they weaponize that against you. Like I would kind of love if that was canonically part of his backstory, that he was able to pull off so many killings because of like the Ted Bundy principle. Like, oh, this is a nice guy. There's no way this guy can be that glove eviscerator. And then bam, you get eviscerated with gloves. It's like, but I trusted him. He was a beautiful and nice guy.
And now it's kind of poetic irony that he's all burnt up.
Yeah.
It looks like a pizza roll. Yeah.
That would have been good.
Yeah.
So many good ideas this week.
Yeah.
Do we have anything more to say on Freddy's Nightmares?
I was just gonna say, also connecting to Glow, it kind of reminded me of the episode where it's just like 35 minutes of 80s programming, like in universe.
Yeah.
That's like the tone it had to me. That's what I felt like.
It's definitely a product of its time, I think. They're obviously trying to compete with like Tales from the Crypt type stuff.
What I think is that, you know, as I said, it's more of a soap opera than an actual horror story. It's like what happens when a suburban family has to deal with the fact that there's a serial killer in the neighborhood, and what is the cop's personal life, how is it affected by this, and then what happens when it turns out that serial killer is an angry dreamin'. But in the end, I must say, I saw the final kill coming from a mile off. It was not scary. It was absolutely predictable. When they told him that the crown sealing on, he goes to the dentist. They tell him the crown sealing will only take 5 minutes. I'm like, he's gonna fucking die. And he hallucinates a scantily clad hygienist for no reason other than to fan service the audience. Like, we made you sit through Freddy Krueger, the soap opera. We're gonna just give you a woman in lingerie because you've earned this for on the show. And the final kill, I knew it. I knew it was coming. It was not even framed in a way. It was like, boom, deal with it. It was just like, oh, when's it gonna be Freddy? All the same, I have to say I appreciate it because it allowed me to make my obligatory quota of this joke. You'll be a dentist.
If only the episode had ended with a Freddy Krueger cover of "You'll Be a Dentist."
You'll be a dead bitch.
Wonderful. Fantastic. He doesn't make many puns in this, disappointingly.
Yeah.
He's supposed to make puns. Oh, now I'm sad.
Certainly in the later movies, there's a lot of puns, like Crypt Keeper level amount of puns in those later films.
This is making me feel like we have to start a horror icon ranking by the amount of puns made.
Yeah. I think Crypt Keeper will always be at the top.
Oh.
Literally every sentence, every word out of his mouth, he's already thinking of his next pun.
I imagine like Freddy like meeting Crypt Keeper and just being like master, like kneeling before him.
I was thinking more like all the horror folks, you know, they get around the tea time table. They drink tea, don't question it. And you know, Crypt Keeper makes his fourth pun about the type of tea they're drinking. And Freddy's just fucking done, and he gets up and all 4 finger blades stab right into him, but he's fucking dead, so it does nothing. Everybody else just looks at him like, you tried to kill him last week, same thing happened. You have to accept this and live with it.
Oh, Freddy, you seem a little teed off.
When you said we were having chamomile, I was expecting 3 courses.
Oh dear.
Oh.
Well, dare I ask, would anyone recommend this to anyone? Would you recommend it to Robert Englund if he walked into your house and he was like, "What the hell are you watching? Is that Freddy's Nightmares? Get that shit the hell out of here!" And then he just threw out with your own hand.
I can't tell you how well this works with Elm Street canon. I can't really tell you how well it will jive if you're specifically looking for more Freddy content, though I will say he is, you know, he's not in it much for it being about him. It's more just Officer Tim has PTSD and guilt for half an hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
But as a horror story, it falls completely flat. It's entirely predictable. The suspense isn't really built to where you either know what's going to happen or nothing happens. And when something does happen, then it's a guy randomly getting a letter that says, "I'm burning in hell here," and then it explodes.
I like the time that Freddy. I like the fact that Freddy took the time to actually write him a letter and mail it.
That was nice of him.
So
yeah,
do you
I
recommend it?
Largely.
Do you already?
Sorry. No, I was just gonna go on. I was just gonna say I have largely the same feelings. I have feeling this is kind of a for something completely different episode because it's so directly focused on Freddy as opposed to just general like horror segments and stuff. So I don't know if I necessarily have like the best indicator of the tone, but like just based on this alone, it didn't do a ton for me, but it was kind of a fun look at just how much Freddy consumed the zeitgeist at that time.
Yeah,
And still is to this day.
Yeah,
more or less. Yeah, he was on the Goldbergs like last year, wasn't he? He made an appearance.
really.
Yeah, they brought back Robert Englund in his makeup for like a comedy skit on the Goldbergs.
Neat.
Right.
Yeah, and he's still in was it Mortal Kombat he was in, Tommy?
Yes, he was in Mortal Kombat 9. He was their first in a long line of wacky movie guest fighters.
Yeah, so he's he's still doing well. It's a good for him.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of like, in terms of fan response, like Martin, I don't remember, we shared that from Patty Cake Productions, that little musical number where they had the big horror crossover and they stuck Freddy like front and center of the Thriller dance segment. And then like I also, I'm into a, so I've been watching like one-shot horror games on YouTube and everything, and I ended up finding this little visual novel that had nothing to do with Elm Street, but the main villain's last name was Krueger and he worked with dreams. So I'm like, oh, this is a reference. And this was made in like the past year. So
No, you will never stop the Freddy. I thought that would rhyme. It really. What's a?
you will never stop.
I will never. You will never give the ready light, as in red light, to Freddy. There we go.
Very good. So I guess all that remains to say is happy Halloween to our listeners. Maybe next year we'll do the Filmation Ghostbusters. Maybe not. Probably not. Probably never.